Hello everyone. The topic of my research is sustainability assessment of traditional and modern Bhutanese house. As you can see in the picture shown on the slide, increasing emissions has made global warming evident with change in global weather patterns, which is resulting in increased occurrence of natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, landslides, etc. And the effect of global warming and climate change can be traced in the loss of biodiversity, the depletion of natural resources, pollution, waste generation, and environmental degradation. According to a study conducted by the NASA's Goddard Institute, the average global temperature of Earth has increased by zero point 0.8 degrees Celsius since the year 1880, and the humans are largely responsible for roughly 50 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission per year. It should be noted that construction industry is responsible for 50% of the global greenhouse gas emission, and the construction industry is also rising exponentially, leading to more emissions and exhaustions. So, therefore, it is important to transition to sustainable development in order to achieve the important goal of protecting our natural environment. One of the four pillars of GNH is conservation of natural environment. However, with increasing population and higher demand for the construction of multi-storied houses, there is acute pressure on the limited resources. It is crucial for Bhutan to closely monitor and protect the exhausting resources through proper mitigation and adaptation measures. We all know that when the other countries accelerated to achieve expansive development and economic advancement, Bhutan emerged as a country with its natural environment as a top priority and a large proportion of its forests and ecosystems protected and intact. So, therefore, it is very important for Bhutan to assess and address the sustainability of the advancing construction industry in order to maintain the carbon negative status. This table here shows the increase in population in the urban centers from the year 2005 to 2017 in the 10 main towns of Bhutan, and we can see that the total increase in percent over the years is 46.9. And this figure here demonstrates the degree of urbanization in Bhutan from the year 2009 to 2019 through a span of 10 years. And we can see here the increase through the years has been linear. The main objectives of the research study is to number one, study the aspects of green construction and conduct the assessment of traditional and modern Bhutanese buildings in terms of environmental sustainability and resource efficiency of the building materials. And number two, to assess the knowledge of representative Bhutanese builders on sustainable construction and determine the barriers or challenges they face. This is the methodology adopted for the research. It has two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is inclusive of literature review on urbanization in Bhutan, review on the environmentally sustainable and energy efficient constructions, and literature review on the features of green construction. So through this review, the assessment of traditional and modern Bhutanese house on sustainability and efficiency was carried out, which led to the results or classification on which of the two, the traditional or the modern Bhutanese house, qualifies as environmentally sustainable construction. And after the result of part 1 was obtained, data collection was followed in part 2. Data collection was collected from people involved in the past constructions in the past 10 years, and the data was analyzed. The results, discussions, and recommendations will be discussed later on in this presentation. Before beginning the assessment, it is important to know what are the features of green construction. So the following are some of the most important features of green construction: use of renewable energy, use of locally available materials with reduced transportation requirement, increased reuse and recycling, reduced pollution, reduced waste production, use of sustainable building materials, use of non-toxic materials for construction, the comfort of occupants, and the energy efficient use of energy, water, and and other sources. It is also important to consider the life cycle assessment of the building materials. The life cycle assessment should include the impact assessment of the building materials through each of the following stage, starting from the material extraction to manufacture, transportation and packaging, the use of the material, and the end life of the material. It is also equally important to consider the different environmental and energy aspects through the pre-building, building, and post-building stages of the materials, which are: for the pre-building, we have the manufacturing process; for the building, we have the building operations; and for post-building, we have the waste management. So we have to ensure that all of these requirements are fulfilled for building material to be qualified as sustainable and resource efficient. And along with that, we also have to consider the three other main aspects of the assessment, which are the embodied energy, carbon footprint, and environmental impact. Moving on to the characteristic features of traditional Bhutanese house, just for the understanding of what a traditional Bhutanese house looks like. The architecture is distinctively unique and cultural, with striking features representing a harmonious ancestral design. There is use of locally available materials, and the construction reflects the local topography and natural climatic condition. And the main building materials used are mainly rammed earth, stone masonry, bamboo, and local timber. For the assessment of traditional building materials on sustainability, the four major building materials used in the constructions were considered, which are rammed earth, stone masonry, bamboo, and local timber. So here we can see that all the materials used in the traditional construction fulfill the parameters of green material. So it can be classified as a green material, except for stone masonry, which is not renewable, but almost always reused and recycled with no environmental impact. Moving on to the characteristic features of modern Bhutanese buildings. Modern Bhutanese buildings are entwined with important significant features of the traditional architecture and urban high-rise structure, and they are usually used as rented apartments in order to cope with the housing shortages. Now, if we look at the assessment of modern building materials on sustainability, then we can see that all of the materials listed here are the major materials, the main materials used, and none of them are environmental friendly or resource efficient. For example, if we consider concrete, then concrete is responsible for 4 to 8% of the total greenhouse gas emission, and it also releases about 2.8 billion tons of carbon dioxide during its production. Steel production causes severe air pollution through the release of carbon monoxide and sulfur oxide. And if you talk about glass, the production of glass uses non-renewable resources, and it also causes acidification from the sulfur dioxide. And the bricks production releases black carbon, which is harmful for both the human health and the environment. Likewise, all the other materials used in the modern constructions are energy exploitive and causes hazardous emission, which makes it very unsuitable to be qualified as a green construction material. Therefore, through the life cycle assessment, we can conclude that traditional Bhutanese houses are much more representative of a green construction, and it fulfills the building materials used in the traditional construction fulfills the criteria requirements to be qualified as a green material. The second part of the research study included data collection from people involved in building construction in the past 10 years. So from there, 70% of the respondents were involved in private house construction, 15% were involved in contract-based construction, 10% in real estate construction, and 5% did voluntary work. Among them, 80% of the respondents were fully aware of what sustainable development means, 5% were partially aware, and 15% did not know what the term sustainable development means. From the 80% respondents who knew what sustainable development is, They define sustainable development as a development without compromising the needs of the future generation, development in which the resources are used sustainably, development which provides protection of the fragile ecosystem, development with minimum negative environmental impact, and development which does not promote the use of toxic building materials, and development with locally available building materials. 95% of the respondents agreed that use of renewable resource is an important component of sustainable construction, and they also agreed that use of locally available materials, the protection of environment, the reuse and recycling of the building materials, use of energy efficient appliances are also important in sustainable construction. As reported by the respondents, the building materials which they used in their construction were from India and Bhutan, with most of the materials coming from India. In the construction of building that was undertaken by the respondents in the past 10 years, 90% of the respondents reported proper waste disposal, followed by 85% of them using locally available materials, and 80% of them installing LED lighting system. And they also considered the ideal building orientation and installation of rainwater gutter, and none of the respondents used asbestos in their buildings. The biggest barriers reported by the respondents in constructing environmentally sustainable and resource efficient buildings were lack of expertise and lack of knowledge and sustainable construction, and also the increased cost of construction. The respondents reported that certain motivation factors, such as the increased awareness, exemption of certain tax incentives from the government, proper marketing, improved access, enabling policy or guideline, the recognition or certification from the government can motivate the people of Bhutan to opt for sustainable construction. All of the respondents agreed that sustainable construction is important, and they also said that they will consider incorporating certain components of sustainable construction in any future building projects they undertake. These are some of the recommendations from the research study. Making some doable measures such as use of locally available materials aligned with the local climatic condition, topography, soil profile, and prevailing vegetation, along with the ideal orientation of the building, important design which required for approval, and the distribution of designated responsibility to the Tromde Zonghaks and the owners, and revision of important documents such as Bhutan Building Regulation and Building Code of Bhutan, with inclusion of sustainability components for strict compliance, and the training of engineers, architects, and building inspectors, endorsement of guidelines for certification, and provision for certain incentives such as earthquake, flood, or fire insurance for a few years by the government, and draft the enabling policies or guidelines for already completed buildings to transition to sustainable and efficient building. Thank you.